So now we're going to put into practice some of the techniques that we've learned previously, and we're going to create this image here, which we've got looking across the Peak District in the United Kingdom, a lovely sunrise location. And we're going to be doing some edits to this using the techniques that we have learned. So yes, if you can select red 13920.raf and open that file, I'm going to come over to our develop panel. So I'm going to click on develop. Now here you can see we've got the information. You can toggle that on and off by pressing I, but we don't really need the information, so I'm going to leave that turned off, and I'm also going to close the panel on the left just to give us a little bit more real estate to work in. So we're going to be doing some basic edits on this image here to start with. First of all, because it was a sunrise, I'm going to warm this image up a little bit just to start with, just to make the image feel just a touch warmer. So I'm going to boost that up to around about 6300, something like that. That works really well. That's 6366 there on the temperature scale, just to increase the warmth in the image, just to overall make it look a little bit more warmer. And then we're going to come down and do some basic adjustments here in the basics tab. So I'm going to boost the highlights in this image, not something I do very often, but I really want to accentuate the light on these rocks here. I'm also going to boost up the shadows as well to around about plus 41. Now please feel free to follow along with this edit, and hopefully we can create something that looks really nice, because to start with, this image is quite flat looking, but we really want to accentuate the tones of this image and bring it to life. I'm going to bring up the whites to about plus 18, and for now we're going to just leave the blacks as they are. I think I might just boost the saturation just by a little bit, maybe just plus 1 for now, and then we're going to come down to the tone curve, and I'm just going to add in a medium contrast tone curve to this image, and I'm going to leave it as it is for now because I feel it looks it looks quite nice. I'm quite happy with how that feels right now. So I'm just going to, I can come back and tweak these lines if I need to, but I think for now that's looking really nice. And then I'm going to come down to my hue, saturation and luminance. I'm going to play around with the colours just a little bit. Now I want to take the greens out of this image. I really want to try to simplify the colours, and quite often in this sort of landscape during the autumn time here in the UK, all the brackens died down. It's a lovely orange colour, and we've got this beautiful light blue sky too. We've got the golden light on the rocks. And to simplify the colours, it means we can really concentrate on two different tones here, and really that they sit opposite each other on the colour wheel. So we've got the blue tealy colours and the orange colours. So the greens that we've got here in the foreground don't necessarily fit in with that, if you like. So I'm going to be reducing those greens down, and I'm going to add in some yellow to those green tones. So I'm just going to bring that right down, that green hue right down to yellow. That's essentially changing all of those greens now over to a more yellow colour. So we're taking those greens out of the image. I'm going to be boosting up the reds just a little bit to more towards the orange as well. So I'm going to be boosting that up to around about 30-ish, something like that, just to take the red out of the image and just add a little bit more orange, just to make it feel a little bit more warm overall. And the orange, I'm going to push a little bit more towards the red. And I'm just playing around with the colours here just to make it feel more natural and more like it actually was on the day during the shoot. Saturation of the green I'm going to bring down a little bit. Again, just taking that green out of the image. And to help lighten some of this foreground area here, I'm actually going to boost the luminance of the greens. I'm going to push that up to around about plus 50, something like that, and that's just helping lift that foreground, because obviously we've got a lot of shadow in the foreground, and at the minute the image feels just ever so slightly unbalanced with the brightness that we've got here. So in terms of toning, that's pretty much it for this part of the image, but next we're going to be working more locally. So we're going to be producing some gradients, and we're going to be using the brush tool as well to paint in some different areas of the image. So first of all, I'm going to be using the gradient tool, and I'm going to just click on that, and it's opening this new panel up, and we're just going to click and drag down from the top of the image down to somewhere about halfway, and then I'm just going to drag that slider down a little bit more and push that up a little bit more. That's just squashing that area. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a range mask for this image. Just to show exactly what we're doing, I'm going to reduce my exposure right down to make it really dark. Now obviously that looks a little bit silly to start with, but this is just going to help us as a bit of a guide. I'm going to come to my range mask here, and what we're going to try and do is mask out these rocks and these boulders here in the foreground. So I'm going to choose luminance for this, and then I'm going to click show mask, and that's going to turn the image to black and white, and it's just going to help us show where the mask is being applied to. Now you can see this red overlay, and you can see that it's affecting where the rocks are. So I'm going to drag the range across here, and we can see now as we do that, we drag that range across to the right hand side, it's reducing the mask there on those rocks. We can then play around a little bit with the smoothness just to see if we can take that completely away from the boulders there. And now I'm going to take off the luminance mask just to see how we are, and we can still see that it is darkening those boulders just ever so slightly. We have to be really careful here we don't overdo it. Obviously I've got my exposure right down, so now let's just increase that exposure a little bit, and we can really see now that we're able to darken that part of the sky without affecting the rocks too much. It is still affecting them a little bit, so let's just bring that in a little bit more. Now you can see the little toggle button down here on the bottom left hand corner. That just essentially turns the adjustment layer off, so the adjustment brush off or gradient tool off, just toggles it on and off so we can see the before and after, which is quite helpful. And I think it's quite clear to see that we're still, too dark with our exposure there, so I'm just going to increase that ever so slightly. Somewhere there looks a lot more natural. I'm going to just add in a little bit more saturation to these blues as well, just to make that blue stand out a little bit more. Somewhere around about +34. I think if we go too far it's going to be over the top. So around about 35, something like that looks nice. It's just added in a little bit of saturation and a little bit more darkness and detail to that lovely blue sky that we've got there. So next up we're going to add an adjustment brush to this foreground here, and essentially what we're going to be doing is lifting the shadows by quite a bit. So I'm just going to click on my adjustment brush here, and I'm going to click O on the keyboard to bring up my layer mask so you can see exactly where I'm painting. And I'm going to increase the size of my brush. I'm just using the wheel on my mouse to increase the size of my brush. And I'm just going to paint in this area here. And now turn my mask off by pressing O on the keyboard again. And now I'm going to increase the shadows quite a bit, just to really bring out some detail in those shadows. Obviously it's looking a little bit washed out now, but that's not to worry. We're going to be working on that a little bit more. I'm going to add in some texture to this area as well, boost that up to about 23, and just a little bit of clarity as well. And now I'm going to warm it up just ever so slightly with the temperature slider. I think I might just bring the shadows down just a little bit, maybe somewhere there. Looks a little bit more natural. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to fine tune the bottom area just a little bit more, and I'm going to put in another adjustment brush on my keyboard just to draw the mask on. And again, I'm just really affecting this lower area now. If at any time we want to take away some of that mask, if we hold down Alt on the keyboard, we can bring up our negative adjustment brush, and that just paints away any areas that we've painted in there. Now let's take off our mask, come back to where we were. Now I'm going to boost my temperature a little bit just to warm the foreground up a little bit more. We're just adding each time to this image, building it up in layers ever so slowly. I'm going to increase my exposure around 3/4 of a stop, something like that. Again, just brightening this area up in the foreground here. Adding a little bit of contrast, I'm going to bring my blacks down just a little bit, around about -17, and just reduce my shadows ever so slightly on this area, just to add in a little bit of contrast. Looking good. I might just boost up the saturation ever so slightly. That's looking better. I'm just going to bring up my mask here and paint out this area here. I don't want to get any more sort of bright areas where this light's hitting that rock. That looks good. So next I'm going to bring up another adjustment brush, and each time I'm doing this I'm building these areas, these highlights in the image, and what I'm trying to do is accentuate these lines in this image and create a path through the image. So what I'm going to do is draw on some highlights in this image. So I'm just going to really roughly work in some paths in this image that lets the eye drag through the image. Now I'm doing this very roughly here, but in a second I'm going to be using my negative brush to paint that away. I find this a lot easier for some reason to fine tune where I've painted stuff. As you can see now, by holding down the Alt key, my brush is turned into a negative brush. That's allowing me now to paint away those areas that I painted in very, very crudely. I find this a little bit easier, but then you might find it a little bit easier to, you know, just paint it in a bit more correctly with the positive adjustment brush. It's just what works best for you, I think. So I'm just trying to accentuate some of these lines in this image, and yeah, just allow the viewer to get drawn through the image a little bit more. So I'm going to release our colour mask there just to show where we've painted, and now we can play around with the exposure a little bit. Just increase the exposure a little bit. I'm going to boost the temperature just to, that's perhaps a little bit too much, somewhere there. Add in a little bit of saturation. Boost the highlights ever so slightly. You have to be really careful here that we don't overdo it. Maybe add a little bit of magenta to it. It still feels a little bit green, but we might adjust that ever so slightly in a minute. Boost the clarity a little bit and the texture. And again, we're just building this up ever so slightly as we go, each time adding adjustment layers to areas to accentuate certain areas of the image. So when we adjust this now, this toggles on and off all of the adjustment brushes that we've done. So you can see we can make quite a big difference to the foreground of this image. We've really brought it to life. It kind of feels like there is some light now being drawn into those areas, and yeah, it balances the image out quite a lot more. So I'm going to click done here with my adjustment brushes, and I'm going to adjust my crop ever so slightly. Just want to bring in, make sure the horizon's around about on this third line here, and maybe just straighten it ever so slightly as well. So compositionally I think it works okay. We've got a bit of a flow through the image here. We've got this sitting on the top third, these rocks here on the bottom third, and some leading lines taking you through the image. I think that looks a little bit better, and yeah, quite pleased with how this image looks overall. To maybe just take away some of this green in the image, I might just bring up my tint ever so slightly with the magenta slider, only a fraction to +19, to add in a little bit more of that warmth, that golden glow that we expect at sunrise. I always like to come back and look at my histogram at the end of the edit to see, you know, if anything's clipping. Now, I really don't want to see any highlight clipping in my images, but I don't mind a little bit of black clipping. I really don't mind seeing pure blacks in my image, but I don't like to see blown out highlights. If we decided that we wanted to, you know, bring up those blacks a little bit, if we click on the histogram icon here, that will show our clipping mask here. All the blue areas are pure black. So what we could do is increase the blacks here. What we'll find if we do that is the image will tend to look washed out. So I'm just going to release those back to where they were. A workaround here, if you wanted to bring that detail back in those blacks, would be to use an adjustment brush and literally just bring up the blacks in that particular area. But like I said before, I don't mind seeing pure black in my images. especially in the very dark corners of the shadows. It really doesn't bother me. I think it looks quite nice, but that's just a personal preference. So we could boost the exposure a little bit as well if we wanted to, just to maybe make the histogram a little bit more balanced over to the right, but I'm going to leave it as it was because I feel that feels to me like how it was when I was there shooting the image. So have a little play around with this edit. You know, you don't have to follow exactly what I've done, but this is how I would go through the edit and edit this image. I think this feels natural to me. It was pretty much how I saw the image when I was there in the field, and that's what I always like to try and do with my images. I like to process them how they were with my own eyes. I don't like to make them look too over edited. But editing is a personal taste. Have a little play around with these settings, but feel free to, you know, push this edit as little or as far as you want, and just spend a bit of time on it, and get to know these sliders and build your edit from there.